Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would review this little video that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a very short video, or at least usually compared to some of my longer ones. But I thought that I would review this little video by that of Dante's Boxing Nation after that of the Lamont Roach Jr. versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight. And the reason why I wanted to review this little video is because, once again, we're going to get Dante's input after the Gervonta Tank Davis versus Lamont Roach Jr. fight. And the reason why I like to review a certain amount of Dante's Boxing Nation's videos is because, once again, Dante's Boxing Nation is a very big part of a lot of the politicized and very racially motivated type of narratives that you're going to see throughout boxing, especially when it comes to certain fighters like that, of a Canelo Alvarez or a Usyk or an Inoue in a sort of negative connotation. But then for a positive connotation, he's going to talk about Gervonta Tank Davis or Terrence Bud Crawford or Shakur Stevenson or pretty much any black American fighter or any black fighter in a completely different and way more positive way. We'll take a look and see what Dante's Boxing Nation has recently stated after Gervonta Tank Davis had, in all honesty, a terrible performance over that of a Lamont Roach Jr. because we all know that if this was a Canelo Alvarez or an Alexander Usyk or someone like that, we all know what the standards from Dante's Boxing Nation would be. It would be about how they're truly not the number one pound per pound fighter and how they were always overrated. If this was Canelo Alvarez who had a performance like this over a fighter overall that had 10 knockouts on their record at most, and then on top of that lost to a fighter in Jamel Herring just about a few fights ago, he would have a field day. He would say that Canelo Alvarez, that he's hands down the most overrated fighter of all time. That's what he would be stating. And on top of that, he moved this fighter up a weight class, even though, of course, they were, very comparable in size. But the thing is that if this was a Canelo or a Usyk or an Inoue, Dante's Boxing Nation and some of these LDBC and new media channels, all they'd be stating is how overrated that particular fighter is, and see, they were never the number one pound for pound fighter, blah, 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 all sort of stuff. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because the comparisons for this video, you can tell overall that a lot of the bullshit that he states about Canelo Alvarez and some of these other fighters, that he doesn't truly believe. And like I've been stating overall for a very long time, he realizes that Canelo Alvarez and Usyk and certain fighters like that are great fighters, and not just great fighters, but all-time great fighters. And the reason why is because the standards overall that he always claims that black fighters have to go through, which is that they're held to a far higher standard, with a lot of boxing fans, and I agree with that. Dante holds, basically non-black fighters to the same standards. When it comes to Gervonta Tank Davis pretty much losing this fight, and it really should have been counted as a knockdown because he willingly took a knee in the fight. I don't care overall if it was allegedly your hair or your braids or whatever it was. You willingly take a knee in the fight, especially in the middle of combat. That's a knockdown. It is what it is. And the referee should have counted that as a knockdown, but it's whatever. Unfortunately for him, he didn't, and of course, he kind of got let off the hook with that one. But anyways, the thing is that overall, once again, let's see what Dante's Boxing Nation has to say, because we all know what the narrative would be if this was a fighter that Dante was trying to tear down. But let's get into it. Let's see what the man has to say.
He took a knee. What is he doing? He forgot his... It's got to be enough. What? Yeah, he's happening. He took a knee. He's got to count. You take a knee like that, I look like a knockdown.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? So controversy strikes again. Gervonta Tank Davis versus...
I'll state this again. This is not the worst officiated fight that I've ever seen, at least when you talk about the history of boxing that I've seen. Probably the worst officiated fight that I've ever seen was Joseph Agbeko versus Abner Mares, where Mares was allowed to land about 40 different low blows, without any point deductions throughout that whole entire fight. That probably was the worst refereed fight that I've personally ever seen. But this is up there, for a pay-per-view price, for a prize, level fight, for it to be a pay-per-view headliner. This is the worst officiated fight that I had ever seen. And Steve Willis is usually a very good referee, but first of all, like I stated, Gervonta Tank Davis shoulders Lamont Roach Jr. straight in the face, doesn't even mention anything about it. No point deduction, no warning, even from what I remember. which would, overall tell why Lamont Roach Jr. was so pissed off in the early part of the fight. He willingly takes a knee, and it's not counted as a knockdown. I usually like Steve Willis as a referee, but he had an awful performance within this fight, and it was very clear that he was favoring Gervonta Tank Davis to a certain degree. It just is what it is. All right, it's whatever. But of course, referees are told that because they're told by either Al Heyman or certain promoters that, listen, we want this fighter to win. So if there's a certain way that you don't make it too obvious, but if you can give them the slight edge in certain areas, maybe don't call as many low blows with them, or, if the other guy's getting in too many body shots, tell him to keep them up, with the body shots, all sort of stuff, maybe give him a point deduction, then, do it. Certain referees are told that, believe it or not. And that's why in boxing, it's so hard overall oftentimes to beat the A side, because you're not just oftentimes just working against your opponent, but you could also potentially be working against the judges and also that of the referee. But that being stated, what Lamont Roach Jr. proved tonight is that if you have the fight within you, and also if you have a great game plan, that it can be done. But you have to be a skilled enough fighter and a great enough fighter in order to do it. And also, no offense against Gervonta Tank Davis, but this was a horrid performance. Like, it was awful. Like, he looked extraordinarily one-dimensional throughout this fight, pretty much looking for the left hand throughout the majority of this fight. He looked like he was flailing. He really did not look that particularly sharp. It was a horrid performance by Gervonta Tank Davis.
Lamont Roach ends in a majority draw, which means if this knockdown that was actually supposed to be called would have been called, Gervonta Tank Davis, he would have lost this fight. And Lamont Roach, he would have officially pulled off one of the biggest upsets in boxing history. Now, Gervonta,
Right, Dante, I'll be waiting for you to bitch, moan, and complain about this being so scandalous the same way that Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder allegedly was. Because we all know DontaesBoxingNation never shut the fuck up about the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder alleged controversy, even though there was never any actual controversy about any of those fights. There was never any actual evidence. I'll be waiting, Dante, overall for you to claim, and try to call the commission, just like you did with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. That ain't gonna happen. But none of that is really necessary. The reason why, once again, I'm doing this video is because Dante, once again, I've been telling people for years, this dude has different standards overall, for different fighters, and anyone with a brain can see it. But once again, I wanted to talk about this because this is just more proof. If this were Canelo, keep in mind that DontaesBoxingNation, a lot of the criticisms that he has over Canelo Alvarez is that he gets outboxed in a certain amount of his fights, but then he just ends up winning by knockout. He's not really that particularly skilled. Well, where's this narrative for Gervonta Tank Davis? Because at least Canelo, at least that, narrative can be proven false if you know how to score a boxing fight. Because he was winning the fights against Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant and Sergey the Crusher Kovalev even before the stoppages in those fights. But Gervonta Tank Davis, you can make a legitimate case that he was losing to Frank Martin, that he was losing overall to that, I believe, of a Rolando Romero. You can make an argument that he really should have lost this fight against Lamont Roach Jr. So where's the narrative overall about Gervonta Tank Davis being overrated? Remember, Dante was so offended that Canelo Alvarez or Usyk or someone like that they're quote-unquote the Michael Jordan of the sport, but he didn't have a problem with Gervonta Tank Davis being labeled as one of the Michael Jordans of the sport. Isn't that very particularly interesting?
Didn't really get hit with anything, not anything clean. When he took the knee, he said he just had some grease of Vaseline in his eye and he couldn't see. But as long as Gervonta has been boxing, he knows he can't take a knee just voluntarily. It'll be different if he got caught with a low blow or if he was fouled, but that wasn't the case in this scenario. Now, Gervonta, he did call it, though. He told everybody that
And it's interesting that Dante said it'd be different if he got caught with a low blow or something else like that. And isn't it interesting that when Usyk got hit with that low blow by Daniel Dubois, now, of course, certain people said that he was not hit with a low blow, that he was hit with a body shot. But here's the thing. Even if you believe that he was hit with a body shot, the referee immediately said that it was low. So Usyk was on the ground overall for a multitude of seconds, knowing that the shot was being called low. All right, so that's what ends up happening. And what does Dante's snake ass say? He says overall that, Usyk really should have been knocked out in the fight. All this other bullshit. But anyway.
Lamont Roach is a tough fight. He's a tough opponent. He said that he's better than Ryan Garcia and Frank Martin. And that turned out to be true. Now, and even though this fight ended in a draw, it's still a win for Gervonta because Gervonta,
Was he really someone that's really better than Ryan Garcia or Frank Martin? Or was it just something that was a tougher fight than Gervonta Tank Davis had expected? Did he underestimate, Lamont Roach Jr.? Or did Lamont Roach Jr., was he just able to do certain things that those fighters are not able to do? Sometimes, in my personal view, there are other fighters that are probably better than that particular fighter, but they just put on a better fight. I don't think that Lamont Roach Jr. as an all-around package is probably more dangerous than a Frank Martin or a Ryan Garcia, but he was able to do something that those two fighters were not able to do, which is actually fight back intelligently with Gervonta Tank Davis and never let go of his ground.
Was mainly worried about losing the fight. This is a bigger win for Lamont Roach because he exceeded expectations and would have been a winner if that knockdown would have been counted as a knockdown. This fight further proves you don't have to be the biggest name in the sport to give someone their toughest challenge. Lamont, he came in and he matched Gervonta with everything. He matched him defense for defense.
That shot right there set him back a little bit. There was a few times in this fight where Gervonta Tank Davis was either a little bit wobbled or he was set back a little bit.
Skill for skill. He was catching Gervonta with counter shots, and I mean real good counter shots. We've never really seen Gervonta get caught with clean counter shots. Certainly not in the late rounds. He was also willing to fight Gervonta on the inside. In fact, I felt like the referee was breaking up the clinches a little too early. He was breaking them up too soon because the boxer still had a free hand to punch, and usually referees will tell you to fight your way out. This was an amazing performance by Lamont Roach, and it was still a good performance from Gervonta Tank Davis, considering the fact that he had to adjust to...
Oh, please. And this is the reason why I wanted to review this video. This is how Dante is going to try to spin it once again. If this was Canelo, Inoue, or Usyk, and this is why you got to be very careful with someone like this, even if you follow someone like a Dante, and even if you want to go on these channels and you're one of these guys that believes that black fighters, that they get heavily mistreated. And all that is true, they do get heavily mistreated, and there's a lot of double standards. Dante is not a guy that you can trust because this dude is such a snake. Like, this dude overall pulls out so much bullshit out of his ass. Once again, if this was Canelo, if this was Inoue, he would have a field day with this. All he would be talking about is how that fighter is overrated and, how they're not living up to standards and they're not really the number one pound for pound. People keep trying to say they're the Michael Jordan of the sport, but, they just keep getting proven as these, great white hypes or these guys overall that, are on the hope list. Once again, that's all he'd be talking about. But Gervonta Tank Davis, he still had a good performance. Yeah, over a guy that lost to Jamel Herring, by the way, a guy who was a B-grade level fighter just about 5 fights ago, a guy that moved up a weight class, a guy that's not known particularly for his power, and a guy that's very skilled, but not known to be exceptionally skilled. Yes, this was still a great performance by Gervonta Tank Davis. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Fighter who was more skilled than, like he said, a Frank Martin or a Ryan Garcia. Matter of fact, trainer Barry Hunter, he called it as well. He said leading up to this fight that this is going to be the toughest challenge of Gervonta's career. But it's truly amazing how styles make fights. You really never know what you're going to get in the sport of boxing. I mean, no one thought a guy that lost to Jamel Herring would be the guy to give Gervonta his toughest fight.
Of course, because it wasn't supposed to happen. Once again, Canelo Alvarez from DontaesBoxingNation would get criticized for years for beating guys like Danny Jacobs, who was in his prime when he just won the second belt in his career, because he had lost to guys like Gennady Golovkin or Dmitry Pirog in the past. Even though those are two A-grade level fighters, and Danny Jacobs gave Gennady Golovkin hell, in that fight, Canelo Alvarez was criticized because, Danny Jacobs was already beaten before. Or some of these other guys like, Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, and Callum Smith, they were European bums, all sort of stuff, right? But then when it comes to Shakur Stevenson fighting Artem or Terrence Bud Crawford fighting Madrimov, someone who only has 12 fights, and has not really proved himself, or Gervonta Tank Davis losing to a guy that's already lost about 5 fights ago, a guy that was moving up in weight, a guy not known for his power, no, this is still a good performance by Gervonta. Like, come on, man.
Of his entire career. Now, even though Lamont, he didn't get the official win on his record, there's no doubt about it. This performance takes his career to the next level. With that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up. That's all I got for now, guys. I'm on to the next one.
But anyways, that pretty much is about it for this video. I just wanted to post that because, once again, we all know what the standards would be from a lot of these LDBC and new media channels. So once again, for those channels overall that would state that Canelo Alvarez, that he looked bad against Plant and Saunders and all those guys, and that, Canelo, we can't really count him as one of the Michael Jordans of the sport because he won those fights by controversy. I'll be waiting to hear those same standards with Gervonta Tank Davis. I'll be waiting on that. But anyways, I just kind of wanted to talk about that because once again, I've been reviewing a lot of these guys' videos for a very long time, showing a lot of their double standards, and that just goes to prove it right there. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.